Namaste, everybody. Welcome to the Festival of Bharat. My name is Sharan Sethi, your host. In today's long form talk, we have Sahana Singh ji. Sahana ji is an author, an editor, and a columnist who writes on a variety of issues, including water management, Indian history, etc. Her articles have been previously published in Discovery Channel Asia, Reader's Digest, and even the Washington Post. She is also a part of many socio-cultural organizations, non-profit organizations that relate to history, culture, and the cause of helping Hindu refugees. Sahana ji, thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to the Festival of Bharat. Namaste, Sahana ji. How are you?
Namaste. I'm fine. Thank you for inviting me.
Absolutely. It's always a pleasure to have you on the Festival of Bharat. And how's the pandemic in America? Because America is going through a lot and you're based out of Houston. So you must be witnessing a lot of events right now.
Yes, the cases are rising, but we are all we don't really go out too much, so we stay indoors and we are masked up. So far we have been fine, but yes, we are hearing about cases of pandemic rising. Hope
Right.
it all comes down soon.
Absolutely. We hope the same too. And I'm really glad that you and your family are safe. Sanaji, the first question I want to ask you is, did people in ancient India really know about hygiene and sanitation? And is there any evidence of it?
Yes, in fact, the people of India were one of the first people to make the deduction between hygiene and disease, the absence of hygiene and how that leads to disease. They were one of the first people to deduce that, and that's because they had the concept of shaucha, which is a very broad term, which includes external hygiene as well as internal purity. So we had this concept of shaucha. So it meant like bathing, washing hands and feet, all these terms, and it included sexual hygiene as well. That's another amazing thing, and they totally understood the concept of isolating the disease-causing um, things in our life, disease-causing excreta and other substances, isolating them from contact. That was very well understood. And under no circumstances were human waste or blood or hazardous substances were to be allowed to contaminate water sources. So this was all there. And so you were asking me for evidence. There's plenty of evidence that this kind of awareness existed in ancient India. Because to just give you a few examples, if we look at our ancient texts, then we have Charaka Samhita. Charaka Samhita, which according to some scholars can be dated to 4th century before the Common Era, but actually Indic scholars think it's much older. It might be as old as 5,000 years old, Mm-hmm. And Charaka Samhita speaks about various kinds of water pollution, how it leads to doshas in the water, how you should avoid drinking water which is contaminated. So you see, it has the connection between lack of cleanliness and the causation of disease. Then Sushruta Samhita, that also shows a clear knowledge about how drinking polluted water can cause various diseases. In fact, both these Samhitas, they also make reference to a certain invisible organisms which might be present in the blood or mucus or phlegm that could be causing disease. So perhaps they were talking about viruses and bacteria.
Right.
And I want to tell you about Mahabharata. In Mahabharata, there are clear references to, how you have to preserve the sanctity of water. So there is the scene when Arjuna makes a vow to destroy Jayadratha. When Jayadratha kills his son Abhimanyu, then he's in a rage and he wants to destroy him. And then he makes this vow that if I do not kill Jayadratha by the end of the day, let me go to the same hell that people go to when they release phlegm or urine or excreta into water. So he said that shows you how much awareness is there. Then there is the Artha Shastra, which talks about severe punishments for those who pollute water sources. And then there are many other texts like Vastu Shastra, Vayu Purana, Kama Sutra. there's so much evidence of the knowledge of hygiene and sanitation. So I wish that these texts could have been used to extract global practices, global best practices, which is needed for a healthy ecosystem, various healthy ecosystems in our planet. We could have used all these texts to make those code of practices.
That's very interesting, Sahana ji. Now,
Yeah.
please tell me, if we knew so much about sanitation and health and hygiene, why did we and why do we still have open defecation?
Sharon, I just wanted to tell you a little bit more about what's in our text. Can I go on a little bit more?
Sure, please do, please do.
Yeah. No, I wanted to tell you about Manusmriti. Manusmriti is a very reviled text and we associate it with all negative things about Hinduism. But Manusmriti has devoted so many verses to disallow the pollution of rivers, water bodies, plowed lands, even the holes inhabited by creatures, even how to keep that clean. That has been mentioned in Manusmriti. And the most amazing thing is that the Manusmriti specifically lists 10 impure substances that are produced by the human bodies. Okay, oily exudations, semen, blood, urine, mucus, feces, earwax, phlegm, tears, sweat. So you see, can you imagine the kind of systematic thinking that has gone into this analysis? And we are talking about a very ancient period in history. And it's indicating that if you touch earwax or excreta, any of these things, and you have to immediately go and wash your hands. You can't use the same hands to clean to have your food. So it's very ironical that today international organizations are coming to organize hand washing programs in India. So it shows how disconnected we are from our shastras.
Yes, absolutely. But I do have a question which I was asking you earlier. Now, if we knew so much about hygiene and sanitation, why did we have open defecation?
So the thing is, they understood open defecation very differently. The ancient Indians knew the dangers of defecating very close to the habitation, and they knew that where we live is where we eat our food, where we breathe the air. So they knew that they need to go very far away from habitation. So they knew that fecal matter can contaminate food and water, as I mentioned to you, it's given in the text. So they went as far away as they could from their houses to empty their bowels. They carried a little bit of water with them in a container, and after defecation they covered the pieces with sand so that no insects would spread disease. And then they used the left hand for anal washing, and then they cleaned this hand thoroughly. But to be doubly sure, they never used that hand for eating. They always made sure they used the right hand for eating.
Yeah.
So the thing is that in ancient India, it was possible for rural people to go to far off places. They were able to find isolated places away from habitation, which were also away from water sources. And after defecation, the waste would be absorbed into the soil and the nutrients would be returned to the soil and it would not pollute water or land. No manual scavenging was needed. So that was a very good practice at that time, open defecation in ancient India. Then as populations exploded, it became harder to find sequestrated places far away from habitation. It reached a point when there was no far away, because even if you went far away, you were close to the next village. So you would be harming those people if you defecated in the open. So the practice of defecating outdoors began to increase the risk of spreading disease. So we must understand that open defecation cannot be sustained beyond a certain density of population. So at that time, the density of population was fine in ancient times, and then came a time when it was not okay. Even just 5 decades ago, population densities were not so high, and open defecation was probably not increasing the risk of disease like it is today. So it's an erroneous assumption to say that some people think that India's open defecation problem is rooted in a lack of knowledge of hygiene, and that comes from our ancient Hindu texts. So I want to make a point about that. This is so wrong. There was an article in New York Times by someone called Gardiner Harris, and he made the insinuation that only Hindus are indulging in open defecation because it's mentioned in their text that they should do so. This is a terrible misrepresentation because it ignores the fact that open defecation was meant to keep the waste completely separate from the living areas And it made total sense to do that. Today, the whole problem of the squalor in the cities, it comes because we are distanced from our Vedic principles of hygiene, disease prevention, and environmental protection.
Right. Absolutely. Thank you. That was very enlightening. In fact, I never knew about many of these things, but I did read the New York Times reference that you were telling, and then I was shocked about the interpretation itself. Right now, Sahana ji, many people, all of us speak about Saraswati Sindhu civilization and about how the sanitation itself was so advanced for the time. It was way ahead of its time, right? So the sewerage, and even they had a flush system. Could you tell us about this?
Yes. So I told you about the open defecation practiced in the villages, right? But unlike the rural dwellers, in the cities, latrines and sewerage were well known. So the people of the Saraswati Sindhu civilization, they were urban people, and they were the earliest to use latrines, soak pits, cesspools, pipes and channels, for water, wastewater disposal. So at that time, both centralized and decentralized systems of sanitation were there. So you find them in different archaeological sites, and they go back to like 8,000 years. So you can imagine how advanced they were. And some toilets just had holes in the ground, while others even had seats to sit on. And in the centralized disposal model, which we found in Mohenjo-daro, Harappa, Chanhu-daro, Lothal, and other places in Greater India, they used terracotta pipes to carry the bath water and effluents, and they had pour flush toilets, not the automatic ones, of course. So they would pour, after they did the job, they would pour water and flush that, and those were carried by terracotta pipes into
Right.
the street drains, and they were collected in pits which were lined with clay bricks, and then the solids were allowed to settle down, and then the supernatant liquid would go into a bigger drain, and then the pits were emptied manually, and the biosolids, they were sent for disposal, maybe for agriculture or anything. And the pits were located at the intersection of several drains so that clogging can be prevented. It was very scientific. So that was centralized. Then we had the decentralized model, which we found in Kalibangan, Banawali, other places. So where it would go from the households, the wastewater, and it would go into U-shaped channels and be collected in perforated jars, which were placed on the main streets. And from there, the jars used to be emptied periodically. So they had both the centralized and the decentralized model. And it's not just, I want to highlight, it's not just the Sindhu Saraswati civilization that had a modern sewerage, because we have found evidence of modern sewerage in Takshashila, Delhi, Ujjain, Arikamedu in southern India, in Tamil Nadu, where they even had industrial wastewater disposal. They had that. Arikamedu was a well-known center for textiles, and they had contacts with the Roman civilization, and they had also a good sewerage system. But let's remember that the majority of the people in India, they were rural, and they lived far away from the cities. So they used the practice of open defecation. Open doesn't mean open, it would be covered. Once they did the job, they would be covered. And the feces would be covered and it will be returned to nature. But after the Muslim occupation of India in the 11th century, then it became common to have harems in the forts, and the women were not allowed to go out anymore for answering the call of nature. That's when the toilets started getting built within the forts. And then it has been speculated that the practice of manual scavenging, picking up the excreta from the toilet, throwing it, all that probably got intensified during that period. So, and typically they used captured slaves to do this job. And that caused a lot of problems.
It's absolutely disheartening to know. And, as you were explaining how advanced our systems were, I was only reminiscing on our history lessons that were taught to us, earlier in primary school. And only if our teachers and if our syllabus taught us our own civilizational history the way you did, I think all of us would be much more aware about how progressive we were as a civilization long ago. Thank you so much for those insights. Sahana ji, there is a parallel, there is a comparison of how the advanced sanitation systems are today and how these can be compared to what we had before. What do you think about this sanitation systems that we have right now? And are flush toilets even a good thing?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I think the modern system of sanitation is deeply flawed. We are all used to it, but if you look at it closely, it has a lot of flaws. So in the modern system, we have sewage, which is the water which comes from toilets, bathrooms, kitchen, everything. That sewage is called domestic wastewater. Now we have in the modern system, we have this, all this is collected in pipes, which are known as sewers, and taken to centralized treatment plants. And at those plants, the sewage undergoes a variety of treatment. It's, you have preliminary treatment, primary treatment, secondary treatment, various other advanced treatments if it's needed. And depending on what kind of final quality you want, there will be various kinds of treatment. Now, there's a huge cost of digging underground, installing the sewer lines. A lot of energy is used to separate the water from the solids. So first of all, we have a practice of flushing our solids by mixing it with clean water. Now, even a little bit of contaminant gets into clean water, it will contaminate huge amounts of water. So we use clean water to flush away our solids. And then we use a lot of energy to separate the water from the solids at the treatment plant. Okay. So, and then after doing all that, when all that water is removed and then it is clean, then it is sent for disposal to the rivers and seas, or it is disposed on land. That is the model that we have. In some cases, the separated solids, they are sent to to be converted into fertilizer, but not many cases. So now, unfortunately, in many places around the world, due to their huge cost, the sewers don't exist, or the wastewater treatment plants don't exist, or they function improperly. And the flushed wastewater and the other wastewater from the houses, they go straight into nature. They go into rivers and seas. They destroy the aquatic life, and they spread disease. So if you have followed my arguments, when clean water is provided to a community, it ironically leads to more pollution, because they're using the used water is not managed properly, and it is released into nature and released into the places where humans will come into contact with it. So this is the problem with the modern system. India treats only about 30% of its sewage. So you can imagine where 70% of the sewage is going. It is going back into our drinking water, into our groundwater, our wells. Even in high income countries, they treat only about 70% of their of the sewage. Now, so the Western style toilet, the WC, has proved detrimental to plants and animals. So we flush the toilet, we don't care where it goes, and then it goes and causes, the wastewater causes havoc wherever it goes. Unless you have a lot of money and you've built a very excellent treatment plant and other accessories, and you ensure that nothing goes back into the community unless it's properly treated. So you always need big financing to have sewers and treatment plants. This is one thing. And the other important thing is the aspect of losing nutrients. So, when we have our food, we get our nutrients from food. And the nutrients come from the soil. It has taken all that from the soil. And then when we eat it, some of it is absorbed by our body, but the excess nutrients that goes into our urine, and then it goes out of our house, it goes into rivers and seas and everything, and we haven't recovered that excess nutrients. And then, so what happens, the urine contains all these valuables, phosphate, nitrogen, potassium, other nutrients, which actually need to be safely recycled back into nature, or we need to recover it so that we can reuse it. But what we are doing is that we are just simply letting it go. And so countries are now importing fertilizers. So it's very strange that we import fertilizers, and then the excess fertilizers that we don't use, we are just letting it go away, and then we are mining all over again. So
Right.
currently, India imports about 90% of its requirement for phosphate fertilizers, and the US imports about 85% of its potash, 50% of its nitrogen fertilizers. So I hope you understand what I'm saying here, that humans are going through the elaborate process of mining and processing to get fertilizers. They apply them to crops. We eat the food with the nutrients and then lose most of the nutrients via the wastewater. So lakes and streams, when they receive these excess nutrients, they suffer from serious ecological damage, and the aquatic life in those places, they also die out because of all these excess nutrients that come there. Then on top of that, the synthetic fertilizer units, they are also energy intensive. They are also polluting. So this is the problem with the modern
Right.
wastewater sewerage system.
It is absolutely unfortunate, and thank you for so vividly describing what problems we face today. Sanaji, you also briefly mentioned about the Western and European management of sanitation. Now, what can you tell us about the waste management in, say, Europe and America, and how did it evolve over the years? And did they also have open defecation, or say even manual scavenging for that matter?
Yes, all countries had open defecation in the beginning. Europe also had it, and then they moved to toilets. Okay, so but the interesting thing is that as late as the 20th century in Europe, the human excrement had to be removed physically. It had to be removed from the cesspits and the privies in Europe. So the people had to remove it, and the toilet waste from the houses used to be collected in the cesspits, and the European lower caste people,
Right.
who did the dirty job of collecting it, they were called gong farmers in French, or gong farmers in English. And
Okay.
they were allowed to only work at night. So in the dead of the night, they had to go into respectable neighborhoods and collect all that excrement. They would have carts with them, and they would put it in the carts, and they would cart it away to the outside the city limits. They were not allowed to live in the main part of the city, and in fact there were penalties, there were fines if they were seen during the daytime. These lower caste gong farmers in Europe who were tasked with removing the excrement. So
Right.
this is how they were called also night soil people. So they were, because they were only seen during night. Now, for some reason, the impression has been created that only in India we have a lower caste that does all the dirty work. But in reality, all over the world, people who engaged in occupations like removing the waste or garbage, they always belong to the lowest rungs of society. And they were kind of ostracized, and they were not given the same respect by the elites. Obviously, no one would like to do this work by choice. Only when modern technologies came on the scene, technologies to inspect sewers, clean manholes, all the gear that people wear, if they have to get into manholes, the protective gear, and then the oxygen masks. Only when all that came, then a degree of respectability was given to people who did the job. So that's how it evolved in Europe, and I'm sure that's how it
Right.
evolved in India too. So, since you asked me about Europe, I must also mention the utter ignorance that existed about this transmission of disease in Europe until very recent times. So they believed in the miasma theory. The miasma
Okay.
theory today is obsolete. The miasma theory believes that disease is caused by smell. Okay, so according to this miasma theory, if there is bad smell in your house, then that is causing the disease, nothing else. So when the
Right.
toilet was introduced, the flush toilet, the water closet, and then when they flushed it, all the solids would go into the Thames River. They thought that's a very good thing, because now we are banishing the smells from our house. Okay,
Right.
and so so people were very happy that according to the miasma theory, we are going to be disease free because we are sending all our waste to the Thames River. So the more the waste that was dumped into the Thames River, the more they felt safer. This has been documented in their newspapers and everything. So London's sewer commissioner, he proudly recorded that a huge volume of human waste has now been emptied into the Thames River from the city's toilets, and they're also giving the numbers, how many tons they have deposited. Now, when cholera struck London, there were many cholera outbreaks in London. They did
Yes.
not make the connection between what they were doing with the toilet waste, how they were sending it to the river. They didn't connect that with the cholera outbreak. So, in fact, the sale of the flush toilets went up when cholera broke out. The sale of flush toilets went up. More and more people installed, and they said that, oh, because we are not removing the smell from our houses, that's why cholera is breaking out. So, can you imagine that even in the 19th century, they had not understood the fact that fecal matter coming into contact with drinking water or food can cause cholera or other serious diseases.
Right.
So compare that with 3,000, 5,000 years before in India, where the Shastras forbade any kind of pollution of water bodies with the excreta, urine, and other things. So even in India, cholera was not really in an epidemic form until the British came. Cholera was known as a disease, but only after the British began to control India, that is when cholera outbreaks started in India.
Right. This is very interesting, Sanaji, because for a very long time we've been blamed that we are the perpetrators of untouchability and that there is caste-based violence. It may or may not have some degree of truth to it, but the ignorance, the sheer ignorance of the Western societies towards sanitation itself proves how advanced we were as a society. And thank you so much for bringing those interesting insights out for us. Now, that leads me to another question. Now, since there has been a history of discrimination against the people from lower rung of the society, even in India, people who were engaged in manual scavenging and even today are engaged in manual scavenging. Can we have toilets? Is it even a theoretical possibility that we can have toilets that do not pollute? Are there any best practices from around the world?
Yeah, see, the thing is that if we Indians had stayed connected with our ancient knowledge and if we had not been colonized, then I think we would have gravitated towards eco-sand toilets or composting toilets because we were already applying the concepts of using minimal water and isolation of waste from habitations, right, from ancient times. So I don't think we would have devised the kind of system that we have today where we have wastewater going into the Ganga River or any other river because for us, rivers were very sacred. So the most environmentally friendly type of toilet is the composting toilet, in which the urine is collected separately, and urine diluted with water can be straight away used as a fertilizer. And the composted solid waste that you have to compost it keep it for some time before it becomes safe enough to be used for soil improvement. So this is the decentralized model that I mentioned. So, if engineers had devised a set of best practices out of the Vedic strictures of not mixing human waste with clean water and not sending wastewater to nature, just like that, then I think we would have had a different world today. It would have been a cleaner, healthier, more livable world.
Right.
So we've got into the wrong paradigm with the flush toilet, sewage, treatment plant in every part of the world. And in India, of course, we took it from the British, and all the others took it from there. So that's how everybody's doing it. We need an informed discourse on the problems with modern wastewater systems, which are guzzling energy and they're allowing nutrients to get lost. So right now, globally, the effort is to reduce the environmental impact of that kind of system. So in America, for instance, we have low flush toilets, or there are rare cases where people are recycling water and using that for flushing.
Right.
And treatment plants are trying to be more energy efficient to reduce their discharge. There are waste to energy plants. So these are some of the things that are being done. But overall, the framework is still very flawed. Then we have the Gates Foundation. They have put millions of dollars into reinventing the toilet. I don't know if you've read about that.
Yes.
Reinventing the toilet. They did a big movement on that. So Bill Gates had said that reinvented toilet is actually a collection of innovative technologies which use different approaches to break down the human waste, destroy the germs, and out of that you get clean water and solid, which you can use for for fertilizer, that kind of thing. Now, the reinvented toilet concept is there, but it's still very small. It's not being scaled up and it's not being widely applied. So it's very difficult because we have already got into the hard infrastructure, which is very difficult to uproot. But we have a window of opportunity in those places in the world where there is still no sewerage grid. In those places, it's still possible to do the right thing. So we can go for eco-sand toilet, composting toilet in those places where there is still no sewerage. So I think you asked me what were the good examples to learn from. Actually, in India itself, there are many good examples of decentralized sanitation with fecal sludge management and in which the nutrients in the waste are being recovered. For example, in Tamil Nadu, there's a place called Musiri where there are public eco-sand toilets, okay, where they recycle the nutrients and then the fertilizer is created out of it. And even during heavy rainfall, those toilets don't get flooded because uh, even where there is high water table, they're still functioning. So in the SwachhBharat mission, for example, that has become very successful because they have installed millions of twin pit latrines. Twin pit latrines do not pollute the environment because they convert the waste into manure. And perhaps the biggest difference between the earlier sanitation programs and the Swachh Bharat mission is the personal interest being taken by the Prime Minister Modi.
Right.
And in fact, when I want to tell you that when I was traveling in 2019 in India, many places, I was very impressed with the clean toilets I found in many of the states. And not just that, I also saw that the people who are cleaning the toilets, they were very proud of the work they were doing. So this is definitely the result of Prime Minister Modi's focus on sanitation. And you also asked me, okay, for the good examples that you asked me, I would mention Japan, because Japan has excellent examples of decentralized wastewater management. First of all, they have an amazing policy, very good policy framework, which plugs all the loopholes, and they have reformed their institutions. For example, they have given high incentives to the people who used to earlier collect the sludge, who were what were their low caste people. Now they are all entrepreneurs because they are now probably selling fertilizers and things like that. So in Saitama City in Japan, I've been there. They have chosen to collect all the sludge from individual houses and use that for composting and improving the soil quality. Okay, so Japan is definitely a country that India should be learning more from. I think we should immediately put an end to manual scavenging in India. That is one thing which is disturbing me a great deal. Today we have the technology to clean sewers and septic tanks, so there's no reason why a human being should go inside a manhole and clean it. And it's a very hazardous environment out there. So we cannot claim to be a civilized country if we allow manual scavenging to continue. We must create a template for eliminating it, which can be implemented in different states of India. It's a very doable thing, and I hope to see this change in the coming times.
Absolutely. We hope for the same too. It is absolutely heartbreaking to see human beings involved in such extremely horrifying tasks. And in fact, funny that you must mention about Bill Gates, because I still remember when he came out with the presentation where he would use urine to recycle water that could be even used for drinking water purposes. The only reason I remember it so vividly is because I was drinking water and then he spoiled it forever. So, thank you so much for sharing that. And that brings me to my last question, Sanaji. We've seen, even in popular culture, movies like Toilet, Ek Prem Katha, uh, raising awareness, and even with Swachh Bharat Abhiyan, there's a lot of awareness even in the rural areas of India about how important sanitation is. So, what role do you think such movies and such campaigns play? Are they really helping stop open defecation?
So that movie which you mentioned, what was it? Toilet Ek Prem Katha, I think. The message of the movie was fine, that we need to put an end to open defecation. That was good. But the way the message was mixed up with many false narratives, that was very disappointing. So it had quite a bit of Brahmin bashing because it made it seem like the Brahmins were the root of the problem of this open defecation. They were shown as backward people who are stupid, ritualistic, ignorant people who resist modernity, like having toilets. So that is a very Hindu phobic narrative, which is exactly what New York Times and other mainstream papers are projecting. right? So I wish the movie maker had made some effort to understand history, and I wish he knew what was written in our ancient texts, because it would have been nice if the main premise of the movie was that we should connect with the basic principles of Shaucha that we always had. And we have it in Sushruta Samhita, Charaka Samhita, Mahabharata. All that should have been brought out in the movie. They could have shown Akshay Kumar telling his father that, look, you should learn from all these shastras which are telling us that we should keep the contaminants away from people, from the rivers. And so the modern toilet is actually fulfilling that. So that is the way it should have been projected to his father, Akshay Kumar, in that movie. He could have shown that the Brahmin ancestors were so particular about hygiene. So that's the way it should have been shown, not as, in terms of making fun of them. So ending open defecation is a great cause, but it's also important to not fall prey to the negative stereotyping of Hindus or Brahmins. Right. So the right thing to do is to highlight that the origin of the practice does not come from ignorance, but from a desire to isolate pathogens from the human settlements. That should be highlighted. In fact, this is also my feedback for the SwachhBharat mission, because they are making a lot of effort to bring about behavior change in the people. The hardest thing is behavior change. So people, even when they have toilet, they slip back into open defecation because that's what they are used to and that's what their ancestors were doing. And they lock up the toilets and they use them as storerooms. So these things are happening. So it's my belief that one of the biggest motivators for better civic sense in the people is pride in the heritage. So if the people who are practicing open defecation, they are made to feel pride in their civilization and they're more connected to their heritage, then there'll be a strong, I think there's a strong possibility that they'll be more mindful about keeping their villages clean, their environs clean. So instead of making toilets seem like a break from the past, the awareness must be increased that toilets today are serving the same purpose that the ancestors were seeking, that is to go away from the places of habitation to ensure that no diseases will spread within the house. So this, that the fact that toilets are doing that very, they're achieving that very purpose, that needs to be conveyed. So today people can achieve the same purpose by using the toilet that will help to protect their health and will maintain the sanctity of the environment. Okay, that's the people should be told that washing hands, following hygienic practices, keeping surroundings clean, ensuring that waste is recycled, all these are part of sacred Indic practices which have come down to us from ancient times. So if the people who practice open defecation are made to feel pride in their civilization, there's a strong possibility they will continue to use toilets and they'll be mindful. So mainly the false stereotyping that Hindus want open defecation at any cost, that must end, and the deep connection with Shaucha needs to be made. So this is the message that I would like to see coming out from both the SwachhBharat mission and also all the movies, documentaries, and advertisements that are coming out.
Absolutely. And I hope your message reaches to all our audience and everybody who are involved with the policy making process in India. And definitely our audience will have a lot to learn from what you just have to say. And in fact, it's been a very enlightening talk. And I do agree with you that to some degree, we've already achieved a lot of awareness about sanitation, because now we are seeing that a lot of states are even, in fact, being declared as open defecation free. And that is just the result of the effort made by people like you. And we hope you can join us time and again for discussing several other issues related to society and civilization. Sahana ji, thank you so much for joining us. I know you've had a very, very busy schedule, but you've been very gracious to take your time out for us. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for allowing me to speak.
Thank you so much, Sahana ji. Have a good day.
Thank you.
And to all our viewers, please do like, share, and subscribe to Citti Media and the Festival of Bharat. We will be coming out with more such talks in the near future. Until then, this is your host, Sahana Singh, signing off.
Namaste. We hope you enjoyed this Citti Media content. Please remember to subscribe to us and switch on the notifications for this channel. For our other social media links, more content, and to support our work, please visit citti.net. Dhanyavad. Namaskar.